Last episode, we went underneath the surface and asked a basic question. In our blended workforce, internal skill pools, external capability, and AI inside the workflow, does the employee employer relationship still exist? And we landed on a clear stance. Yes, it still exists, but the terms change. Because work stops being experienced only through one manager and one role and starts being experienced through the system. The system is allocation, decision rights, boundaries, and fairness. Today, I want to take the next step because once the relationship terms start moving, something else starts moving with it. Culture. Not how we feel, the operating reality of how things work, how decisions get made, how work is allocated, how standards are enforced, how people speak up, how overload is handled, what gets rewarded, what gets tolerated. That's culture. And once work becomes more fluid, those things start changing, whether you meant to change them or not. For context, I'm an HR manager by background. I work with organizations on how work is designed, how capability is built, sourced, and coordinated, and how those decisions shape culture over time. So I have seen many changes going on right now. And like, for example, a company builds an internal talent marketplace as a not as a nice to have, but because priorities keep changing and the business wants speed, then they add external partners because internal movement alone can't cover volatility. Then they layer AI into workflow because execution can be scaled faster. On paper, it looks mature, more flexibility, faster staffing, more specialist capability, lower headcount pressure. But here is what quietly starts happening. People stop knowing who decides what. A project lead tells someone, "You are on this now." Their line manager says your objectives have not changed. The platform says your utilization is low. Procurement says that work is out of scope for the vendor. AI outputs something that looks good, but no one is sure who owns the risk. Then comes the culture symptoms leaders recognize. Communication becomes political. People stop taking smart risks. Reliable people get overloaded. Everyone becomes careful with the truth. And we often label this as engagement issues. It's not. It's operating ambiguity. And the evidence base for why ambiguity matters is strong. Role ambiguity and unclear expectations consistently relate to worse performance outcomes across studies and meta-analysis supported by Science Direct as well. So here is the first anchor. And blended work culture becomes an operating design problem before it becomes a moral problem. What I mean by culture here, when I say culture is how we do things here, I'm not reducing it to operational efficiency. I mean the whole lived system of daily work, like how decisions get made and escalated, like how roles are defined and protected, like how workload is set and constrained, how conflict is resolved, how voice works, two-way communication, not just announcements, how people are treated when something goes wrong. At the same time, what gets rewarded and what gets tolerated. Culture is not imposters. Culture is the rules people learn by living inside the system. And this is why work design matters. Even supported by a lot of research that work design is not only a container for output, it shapes learning, development, and health. So if the way work is designed changes, culture changes with it. Why blended work makes culture harder by default? Because it introduces three predictable pressures. First pressure is interfaces multiply. You don't just have teams, you have interfaces where between employees and project leads, employees and external partners, internal teams and vendors, humans and AI outputs, line managers and marketplace systems. Every interface is a point where expectations can collide. And when expectations collide repeatedly, people stop trusting the system. CIPD evidence shows that trust and psychological safety as conditions shaped by what leaders and systems do in practice. And they link them to positive outcomes, including performance. What's the second pressure point? Decision rights might get blurred. In stable models, who decides can stay implicit. In blended models, implicit becomes dangerous. If decision rights are not explicit, what you get is slow escalation, risk avoidance, blame shifting, informal power gains. This is not a personality problem, it's design. Third pressure point is coordination. Load rises before capability does. Blended work can accelerate delivery, but it usually increases coordination. And coordination tends to land on the most reliable people. That's why collaborative overload has become a consistent pattern in modern work. Time fragments and execution suffers even when everyone is busy. So this is where culture starts shifting from how we perform to how we survive. So ambiguity drives a withdrawal. Role ambiguity and role conflict have been studied for decades. There is a meta-analytical work that shows role ambiguity has a negative relationship with job performance and is associated with other negative correlates. There's research and science direct on this. But the later relevant patterns is behavioral changes. When people don't have clarity, they don't feel, and they just don't feel uncertain. They change their behavior, like reduce initiative, avoid ownership, stop speaking early, seek safety and compliance, optimize for visibility instead for outcomes. That's the reason this is not a soft topic. There's a research by Amy Edmondson's foundational work that defines psychological safety as a shared belief that it's safe to take interpersonal risks in a team, speaking up, admitting errors, asking questions. And there's meta-analytical evidence also that shows that it relates it to performance outcomes and citizenship behaviors, even beyond related concepts. So in blended work, culture is tested right here. Do people still feel safe to tell the truth early, or do they start managing optics? That's the difference between a learning culture and a blaming culture. Culture doesn't survive fluidity by values only, it survives by design. You need to design for that as well. And if we move how to redesign that, when capability distributed, then orchestration is the advantage. Culture is the operating system that makes orchestration work without breaking people. So Here are cultural levers that actually hold blended work. First lever is purpose as a boundary, not as a slogan. You will source capability. The question is not should we source capability. The question is what stays non-negotiable because it defines who we are. Purpose becomes the boundary that keeps decision coherent. This aligns with the workforce ecosystem framing. Organizations operate with interdependent contributions beyond employees, and orchestration needs integrated coordination. The second lever is two-way communication as infrastructure. In fluid systems, communication is not updates, it's drift control. And how is going to help you? It will help you to make earlier risks visible, learning circulation, people willing to speak before problems harden. Even CIPD evidence emphasizes that trust and psychological safety can be strengthened through consistent leadership behaviors and environments that support speaking up. So the practical question here becomes, where can people raise problems safely? What happens after they raise them? Do decisions become clearer or disappear? Silence is a cultural signal. Lever 3 is role clarity. Most organizations lose culture here at interfaces. In blended work, you need clarity on who owns outcomes, who approves trade-offs, who can change priorities, who is accountable across boundaries. What down means where escalation goes. Role ambiguity is not a wide, it's a measurable and it's linked to worse outcomes, as we discussed before. And labor 4 is work design that supports health and learning. Culture is not well-being programs, it's whether work is designed so people can perform without burning out. And if we look at it's a learning and development. This is the main part of that. Job demands resources theory explains why prolonged high demands without sufficient resources increases burnout risk. Resources support engagement and performance as well. In blended work, demands increase, coordination, uncertainty, context switching, boundary management. So the culture lever, this is going to protect focus with workload, design roles with real decision rights, reduce unnecessary coordination, make priorities explicit, make stopping rules explicit. And the fifth lever is leadership as orchestration, not supervision. Managers must orchestrate priorities, interfaces, fairness, learning loops, boundary protection, and incentives matter. If managers are measured only on local output, they will block movement and hold talent rationally. That's system design and it becomes culture. So what happens if you don't redesign culture in blended work? If you don't design the operating system, don't design your system, how you work, the default cultures become predictable. What that might be, don't speak early, don't take risk assignments, stay visible only, protect yourselves, you are the priority only, avoid accountability unless it's safe. And culture becomes an optics machine. When speaking up is unsafe, this for sure is going to reduce learning, is going to slow down, and errors will improve. Research explains here that this is so corrosive, people don't come up with what's happening. So when when the relationship becomes system shaped, culture becomes system shaped too. Because culture is how we do things here, and in blended work, how we do things is defined by interfaces, decision rights, boundaries, workload governance, and voice. So you can't treat it like a program, it has to be treated like a design. And in the next episode, I'm going to take this what this does to performance and development when work becomes assignment based, and how performance stays real when work travels to projects. So if you have any question regarding that cultural shift, how you can design that, how it still matters, and how it impacts your overall performance, feel free to reach me out. And thank you for listening.